Sorry about that. Hey, everybody. It is 9:28 on a Friday night. We are live. This is the second attempt at a broadcast. I'm going to focus on one thing. I was going all over the place, and that's why I had to get rid of the previous live stream. As you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died today, age of 83, I believe. And there have been a lot of tributes and things like that, and I would go into that, but it took a lot of time to set those things up, and I don't want to go through that again. But as I was going through unsocial media tonight, I noticed there were a lot of people who were talking about expanding the court from 9 people to an indeterminate number. And I was wondering, how would that be done? I mean, it hasn't been expanded since the middle of the 1800s. And I came across an article from the good folks at Common Dreams. They put this thing out in June of last year. And basically, I'm going to read this. And this is how according to them, there are 4 ways that you can expand the court. So I'm going to read this. This is from Common Dreams. The writer is Thomas Neuberger. And it starts thusly. In the same way that countries like Libya are failed states, the U.S. Supreme Court is a failed institution, always partisan, either mainly or partially. Its authority, meaning the people's acceptance of the validity of its rulings, rests on a kind of momentum, a belief that despite its long history of missteps, for instance, Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson, to name a couple, the court can be trusted in time to self-correct. That the Supreme Court was failing in its constitutional role had been clear to close observers since the 1976 decision in Buckley versus Vallejo, which ruled that election spending was speech. Yet, despite the numerous bad decisions that followed, the momentum of belief and the illusion that Anthony Kennedy represented a swing vote on an otherwise ideologically balanced bench has kept most Americans, if not blind, then unnoticing of the modern court's deadly defects. The first real crack in the dam of faith occurred with the Bush versus Gore decision, in which a nakedly partisan majority installed a losing presidential candidate in the Oval Office simply because it could, using only its authority and not the law as justification. Later decisions like Citizens United put proof to many people's suspicions that the court was an operative in a war of political control and no longer a place where law, even bad law, had a place. The recent manipulated addition of the clearly unfit Brett Kavanaugh, a partisan right-wing warrior, to the bench confirmed those suspicions in spades. He even appeared to threaten revenge when he reached the court for a way he and his confirmation were treated. What will happen when and if some, but most, consider the Supreme Court's illegitimate when the court reveals itself to be fully what it is, a captured body serving a powerful, very small political minority, the very rich, the pathologically moral, to the exclusion of the whole of the rest of the country and its needs. We're poised on the cusp of that revelation if the court's self outing in full view of the public, with cases like Roe v. Wade, to name just one, coming before it, and a bench with no longer a supposedly swing vote. The country is about to witness from the John Roberts judiciary what it had witnessed from the Mitch McConnell Senate. What it has the power to do, it will do, simply because it can, however destructive the results to the norms, precedent, or established behavior. What we're about to witness is Bush v. Gore on steroids. Not a semi forgivable, if monumentally wrong one off, but a series of decisions that define a willful judicial oppression that will last through the next generation. So, what can be done to prevent this oppression and the revolt that will surely follow? Is there a solution? Well, there are four proposals, and most of those involve expanding the court. It's been often offered as an answer, but the last attempted expansion, FDR's so called court packing scheme, still leaves the bad taste in the mouths of most Democratic politicians, even though it worked. Anyway, the composition of the Supreme Court has changed many times throughout our history, and the number of judges was deliberately and explicitly left to Congress, an obvious example of a judicial check against the over-exercise of judicial power. Clearly, congressional action can address the problem. But what should the Congress do? Is court packing the only alternative? In an excellent article published in the Harvard Law and Policy Review, Kurt Walters offers not just one, but four ways that Congress could restructure the court. Each deserves attention and consideration, especially starting tonight. The first and most straightforward approach to expanding the court is adding 2, 4, or 6 new judges to the court. This suggestion has been advanced by Professor Michael Klarman of Harvard Law School, among others. This expansion would serve to offset the tarnished confirmations of the most recent 2 Supreme Court appointees, although critics of this approach, including Senator Bernie Sanders, warned it could unleash a spiral of retaliatory moves by whichever party is in power. The second option is to reconstitute the Supreme Court in the image of a federal court of appeals. This action would increase the number of judges to 15 or a similar number. Panels of justices would be drawn from this larger group with an option of what is called an unbanked review. This plan would only dislodge the court's current reactionary majority, but the panel format would still allow a greater number of cases to be heard. Third is a Supreme Court lottery, a more aggressive version of the panel strategy. Daniel Epps and Ganesh Sitchamaran have outlined this proposal in a forthcoming Yale Law Journal piece. I'm assuming that has already been published since this was written in 2019. This course of action would increase the number of justices to 15 or okay, that's another one. Going back down. Okay, I lost my place. Anyway, all federal appellate court judges under the lottery plan, roughly 180 total, would become associate justices on the Supreme Court. Panels of 9 justices would be randomly selected from this pool. Importantly, decisions on whether to grant senatari, whatever that is, on a given case. I should read these things before I start reading. Uh, on a given case would be made up of panel members who would not know the ideological makeup of the panel who that would hear the case outside of maybe some research that you would do after the fact on who uh, appointed such a justice. Uh, Thus, the plan would frustrate partisan maneuvering, but not eliminate it, I would assume. Fourth and finally is Epson Citamaran's idea of a balanced bench. This proposal aims to counteract the effects of partisanship on the court by explicitly recognizing and institutionalizing partisan presence. The court would have 10 justices, 5 for the left, 5 from the right. The 10 justices would select sets of 5 additional judges who would serve a future non renewable 1 year term. That selection would operate on a requirement of near unanimity to ensure that this final set of 5 justices would be relatively even handed. However, it is not certain how a Democratic president would fill a vacancy in a Republican seat that arose from that person's tenure, or how a Republican president would fill a Democratic vacancy. But there you are. Again, uh, just simply adding 2 to 6 justices on the court reconstitute the Supreme Court in the image of a federal court of appeals, which would increase the number of justices to 15 or more. Uh, the Supreme Court lottery, just grab, you know, any appellate court judge, put them on the bench and see what happens. Or a balanced bench, 5 on the left, 5 on the right, 5 uh, separate judges that would make a situation where, you would have a ruling. Which one do you think you like? Or maybe we just keep it like it is and have the same BS we've been having for over 150 years. If you have any questions about that, any comments on that, or how bad I was at this, please leave them in the comments below. Please also be kind in the comments. And if you want to subscribe to this, just hit the red button, and hopefully I'll be able to talk a little better when I've had some sleep. It's been a really rough night, and our condolences to the family of Justice Ginsburg. That's it. We're done. Good night.